So hey there, guys. Welcome to the official book review that we put up here with my friend Jonathan Pishner from Apex Counseling. He's also been, a great sponsor and friend of EPT as a whole. And what happened, in essence, to bring this first book review together is, as you know, if you come across VPT, is I am a big believer in books and reading. We have probably one of the only gym libraries in the country, to be honest. And reading on some books by an author named Cal Newport, specifically Deep Work and Be So Good They Can't Ignore You, earlier this year, I came across one of his other books called How to Be a High School Superstar. A revolutionary plan to get into college by standing out without burning out. Now, I'm not going to lie, I actually caught the superstar part first, just due to working with so many student athletes. So as I actually got it and found out that it was more so about standing out for college admissions without being overly stressed, that's when I thought it'd be actually a really good read to expand, and also thought it would be great to involve JP here. I said we're actually looking forward to doing a lot more of these, I think, as well, depending on just seeing how the subject matter continues to grow. And it'd be fantastic because that way, with what he can do with counseling in the mind and helping people with their mindset, and also my connection to athletes from both in the college level in the past and, of course, high school, middle school, primary athletes in what they want to do as well. Anything you want to add to that, JP?
Just that, I think, especially us doing these things together, I love the idea of it because in a way we both actually do exactly the same thing, just through massively different avenues, trying to get people to where they're going in the most effective way possible, oftentimes the quickest way possible, because, for our counseling practice, we try and, why would we spend 10 years treating depression if we can treat it in one? You guys try to get people to the championship level, as quickly as they can without having to spend a decade on it. And a lot of the skills involved in that overlap with just general how to live your life in the most effective way possible. So I'm actually really excited to do some of these.
Yeah, same here. Like, one thing another similarity here, I come across as a strength coach a lot. I know you do as well, with counseling, but also talking to, people who work with, like, whether younger adults or kids, teens, whether it's as coaching, as teachers, or, just the parents themselves, is how much understanding them and giving them support, how far that goes right there. It's amazing how little support sometimes these kids can get. And a lot of times what happens is, as adults, we can get so caught up in like bigger issues, bigger things that people face. And we look at it and we look at what a teenager is facing now, or a high school athlete, from the perspective of our life, where those things have been, like shrunken down some in importance or even muted. And that accidentally, it's a well-meaning thing, because, when an adult does that, tells a student athlete, or a high school kid, that something they're stressing out about isn't that big of a deal in the long run. It's well-intentioned, but it accidentally leads to the wrong purpose. Like, usually at best, it's just going to leave a student thinking that we don't understand them, we're not taking them seriously. Even worse, it can actually create, actual issues, which I know is where, you deal with that all the time. Where one of the things that I loved about like this book and just talking about this is, if we actually realize that, a high school student's life, these things are important because their perspective is like, that is their life right now. And those are the big issues they're dealing with. Like, I don't know a single high schooler that doesn't understand that, yeah, there's going to be other bigger things when they're adults, when they're later, in college, in the job. They know that, but that's not now. So if the more we can basically like help them with their own perspective and make life better for them now, then the more effect we can basically have.
Like, thinking about just even the title of this book, I love the title because, like, it acknowledges people want to be a superstar, but with also like how to not burn out. Because I feel like what a lot of people, I should say a lot of adults do that's a mistake is they tell people, oh, well, it's okay. You don't have to worry about being a superstar. I mean, that's like you just said, a well-intentioned idea, but the person experiencing that is not going to hear that.
Yeah.
And he even acknowledged, like in the first few pages of this book, of like, yeah, okay, that's the right idea, but since nobody's going to hear that anyway, how about we just deal with the person who wants to be a superstar?
Yes.
And I thought that was a very wise, like, perspective to write the book from.
Yeah, exactly. Like the introduction and then the very last conclusion of the book actually both do, I think, an awesome job of pointing that out. So to everybody watching this, we'll go and give you like a synopsis right now as to the book. Is that in essence, like Jonathan was saying, that it's for kids who want to be, they want to do really well. And the book is taken from the perspective of helping you get into your dream college. But I can tell you right now that even as a 37-year-old adult, there are things in this book that I can apply to myself right now and improve, my life now, future, everything like that. So, I mean, it's definitely not an only, it's like, while it's niched, it doesn't have that one use only. I said, but that goal is for kids who want to do well enough in school to get into their dream school, but also without burning out and without just joining the rat race that most kids think they have to do. And sadly, it's what most teachers and honestly a lot of school counselors push as well. It's like they're used to that system. They think that the way to win is just to do more, more, more. Everybody has the same 24 hours to, not just work and put themselves through stress, but to rest. Most people don't rest. For me, I see it a lot physically as well as mentally. And so I know, Jonathan, you get a lot of kids with that emotionally as well.
The results by volume approach is quite popular amongst all age ranges who are trying to like be successful or productive or performing or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And basically the second part you said there about like the introduction and people not hearing it well is, so they pointed out right there in the first few pages of the book, is there are so many experts out there, again, well-meaning, trying to tell kids to just not stress about it, that getting into a certain college isn't the end of the world, etc. But I said, if that's your goal, or it's your parents' goal, I said, you're not going to hear it. Or I really like the sentence it used with the parents that, well, that's okay, but my kid can handle it. Like that's the perspective of most parents. And again, it's all well-meaning. You're not thinking like, oh, like I want my kid to burn out or, like either succeed or die.
Well, yeah, because I mean, if you put that in a slightly different context, there's all kinds of things we can handle. That doesn't mean it's a good idea. Like I can handle it if you smash me in the head with a brick, probably, but like that doesn't mean it's good for me.
Exactly. Yes. Exactly. And I know from talking to kids all the time that, yeah, the amount of homework these days is on a completely different level than it was 20 years ago when I was in high school, which, by the way, I hate saying that. And then also, like, I was actually just talking to somebody yesterday, same thing with AP courses, like what 25 years ago was in essence an honors course. Like if you were, like you did well in school, you wanted to do well, get into college, so you took honors classes. Now that's AP courses now, which are even higher level, and they have the super stressful test at the end of them. Like almost every other freshman or sophomore that I come into contact with has an AP course every semester, if not more. Like these are just expected things now.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, and I tell you, I loved, because if I was going to state my main takeaway from this book about that is that he basically acknowledges the brute force method will work.
Yeah.
But there's a much easier way and a much more enjoyable way to do it for people who are willing to engage with it. And the sad thing is, like, that's almost got to be the attitude of like, okay, yes, easier if you're willing to try this, because since that's not the method that's co-signed by like our overarching culture, it seems scary. Like, it's the same thing with weight training. Like whenever I do weight training, there's this voice in the back of my head. If I'm not sore the next day, it tells me I didn't do enough. Like,
right.
I know that's not right. I know that's not necessarily true. But it's almost like, since that is the idea I grew up with, it's hard for me to push back against that. I love almost everything in this book. And I think the main takeaway is that, yeah, brute force will work. But if you're willing to try something different, here's a method that can work for an awful lot of people.
There is a level of brute force, like you're saying, that is going to be required as a student athlete. Like, you can't get around it. But ways that this book can help you maximize everything else and your overall recovery, which is going to happen every way, physical, mental, emotional recovery, are all going to improve if you take the parts of this book to the other parts of your schedule. And then, the crazy thing is, I said, the way that the feedback loop works is, honestly, your athletic performance I can guarantee will improve as well. For me, with student athletes, I said, this honestly goes for all students these days who want to do well and get to that next level, whether it just means the college of their dreams or the college of their dreams plus being able to play a sport at that college, or, band at that college, any other. It doesn't have to be an athletic event. But I said, you're already stressed, like physically, emotionally, and mentally. So the physical stress is the one that the student athletes are going to experience more so than the normal student. But the emotional and the mental stress is there as well. Because you have, of course, performance itself, performance anxiety. If you're in any competitive arena or performance arena, like I said, like you can put band right in on this too. Any performance arena, you're going to have performance anxiety to some degree, because you're going to experience failure. Like, there's no perfect athlete, there's no perfect athletic career, there's no perfect, you're going to miss a note in band every once in a while, even if nobody notices you do. Things like that. You have that, like that emotional stress, the mental stress of preparing for those things, and again, just also knowing through them. And then, so athletes, especially, the physical stress. But then also your hyper scholastic, like, let's call them scholastic athletes. I don't know, but so your hyper driven students, like class students, where their goal is to get that valedictorian, perfect SAT, ACT, whatever it may be. You're going to have physical stress too, because we all know a part of that is spending all your time studying, and that probably means you're not sleeping. So,
and not sleeping, you've got cortisol, good chance you're not getting proper nutrition, hydration. So yeah, I mean, definitely a bodily toll is taken for sure.
The book is divided into 3 laws, and it leads us to that very first one, which is the underscheduling. If you go into this kind of already feeling like it won't work, or at least that open mind to see where it leads, that's the part that you're probably only getting a few pages in and then just already giving up on it if you've decided it's not going to work. So I said, so if you decide to approach and see how this could actually like work and benefit, I said, like so many students out there, in the underscheduling part is an enormous eye-opening achievement.
And when he was talking about it, my takeaway on like what that really means, underscheduling, is that realistically that you have many hours within the week that you basically are not scheduled. So I know his proposition was you should almost have like 3 free hours a day and pretty much a full day and a half at the weekend.
Law of underscheduling literally means leaving yourself good open chunks of time on a regular basis. So it doesn't mean like one off day, anything like that, but just good open chunks of time on a regular basis, ideally with at least a minimal amount. Like you said, the way like his official rule, if possible, was to be done with anything that you needed to do by dinner,
right,
through the weekdays, And then, like you said, anything on weekends ideally could be done in half of the day, but only one of the 2 days.
Right.
Yeah, leaving the other 1.5 days free. And so that right there.
But like free asterisk.
Oh, yes, exactly.
Because there's a specific purpose to utilize with that freedom. It's not
exactly.
All right, now I've got 30 extra hours to watch YouTube and scroll through Instagram and watch TikToks.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, so right there, that idea of free time is going to seem crazy to the average, like high achieving, striving student and or student athlete, especially once you add practice in there. But I said, but I really believe watching it and knowing, you know, student athletes athletes at every level, that it's definitely something that can be done.
Yeah. So the reason underscheduling works is because there's a specific purpose to it, which is if you're trying to get into, let's say your Ivy League school, but I mean, it could really be anything, any like thing you are trying to get into, whether it's your dream job or whatever. It's about being able to look like a superstar. And what underscheduling does is it gives you the opportunity to explore areas where you can generate enough massive interest to become that level of superstar. And the purpose behind it is like, so let's say, I am in 5 clubs. And my Ivy League person, I want to get into Stanford. They're looking at my thing and they're like, oh, okay, this person's in these 5 clubs just like everyone else. So you don't stand out other than like, okay, yeah, sure, you do exactly the same stuff as everybody else. So the idea is that you use this time to figure out how you as a person can stand out and really double down and triple down on that number, because that's going to make you stand out better for your dream. You feel like I captured that pretty well?
A couple things to add to that are, like the one thing is it said you absolutely, like you can quote unquote become interesting on purpose, but ideally it's something that, you would find naturally, but you had to actually put effort into trying new things or checking new things out. Like that part has to be on purpose. And that's what really brings it together with what you alluded to earlier about the free time being used. And like parents, coaches, kids, I'm staring at you right now on the screen. The best way to use free time is not to randomly just scroll on your phone, be on your phone, be on the computer, FaceTime, TikTok, etc. It's like, not saying those things are bad, not at all. But don't let them just encompass and expand into all of your time not spent on your sport or school or whatever.
You're not unless you are just lucky, you are not going to find the thing you're interested in on the first, third, or fifth try. It's going to be like the 20th thing you try or further down the line. So being willing to just try a bunch of different stuff and quit things is absolutely essential to this. I want to make sure we didn't accidentally skate past that point.
These are some of things I looked at specifically as just the biggest benefits the most direct benefits you can expect to get from looking into this book and applying it to your life or your kid's life is, one, you're going to learn ways to improve your chances of getting into a good college with the least amount of added time. Again, so if you're already going to school from 7:30 to 3 in the day, and then at some point in time you have practice and or weights, which let's call it realistically is going to be at least 3 hours most days. Add in preparation, drive time, whatever it is. So that already puts you basically to dinner time in that time frame. So anything else you can do that is going to really give you a big push and a big boost to be able to catch good colleges' eyes that you want to go to with the least amount of time is enormous. Because I said you're already at that kind of dinner level with other things to do. Number two is it's going to decrease school and admission stress, because I feel like, from that confidence comfort level, as you get into once you do to put the time into just relaxing, free time, exploring, and you do find something else that you're genuinely interested in, and start working on it and digging in on it more, you will develop a natural confidence that it is going to only benefit you. Kind of the big benefit as a person that you get from this is you become more interesting. And that's what catches the eye of the college admissions process. Being interesting is also going to catch the eye of most college coaches, because again, when they're looking at other film and stats, and if you have other athletes that are fairly similar to you, and with how competitive getting into high school athletes trying to get into college athletics is, anywhere between roughly 2, 3 to 7% of high schoolers get to play in college at all. You're going to have a lot of people you're similar to. Being more interesting is going to only help.
Jerry and I, we both, as business owners, interview people. That means we get to see resumes. We're not that different than people who are reviewing these things for college admissions. I'm just going to tell a story about interviewing applicants for a job. A lot of people submit a cover letter. Guess how much time I spend reading that cover letter? 3 seconds. I skim over it, and it says exactly the same thing that every other said. I am a motivated and dedicated person who is in love with the thing that they do. I mean, it just says the same thing that everybody says. It's not wrong to submit that. I don't, it's not like I take points off for that. But what did I get out of it? I got nothing, just because that's what everybody says. The thing that makes people stand out when I'm looking for my superstar to hire for my business is, what's something that makes them stand out? Oh, you presented at this conference. Not everybody presents at conferences. Let me go and ask some questions about that. Oh, you use this counseling theory I've never heard of. Let me ask some questions about that. I mean, I assume you probably do the same thing, Jerry. I don't know.
I had my first true open hiring session about 1.5 years ago, where I actually just opened it up, was, hey, look, seeking a new coach. Here's the essential role, send everything here. And out of about 50 applicants, I mean, I had, I think, even only 8 people even made it to the next round in essence. And that was because, like you said, just super reading through, if you could tell that somebody had in essence just hit those keywords that were on the resume, but then put nothing else about either where they showed that they were really interested in coaching and interested in doing a good job there, because that's what people look for. Like I said, from the business owner perspective, you're looking for somebody who's interested in doing a good job and serving people, and ideally being interesting for your company. Because you can teach or expect a certain amount of proficiency and everything else. If you're a coach or you're an admissions officer, it's kind of the same thing. That everybody applying, you immediately cut out anybody who say doesn't have the minimum grades or things like that first. But after that, it's who's going to make my school or my team better by actually bringing something to it, and not just being a carbon copy of the same type of new normal student. One
of the reasons we're kind of really telling people to consider reading this and trying this out is because we personally get to look in and say, oh yeah, we actually do this exact same thing that he's proposing college admissions officers would do. So I mean, this is real world stuff that will carry through even just past college. Like Jerry said, if you're 26 and you read this book, you'll still get useful stuff for trying to get into your dream job.
Yeah. The third of the main ways that I saw that this would really improve anybody's life, like I said, but especially to the student who actually gets a chance to read it while still in school, is this following, I said, even a portion of the advice in this book, or the steps, will automatically, I feel, but you have to do it, but will increase the way, or increase provide you ways to increase your success after sports or after school or after band, again, whatever that is. And trust me, that's something that usually the more tunnel vision of an athlete you are, the less you actually think about that. And, you know, dealing with high school athletes, you know, a lot, like most of them for me want to go play in college, but not all of them. And actually, the crazy thing is, the ones who don't have a plan to play in college are usually the mentally most prepared for what to do when that sport is done than the athletes 4 years older who are about to finish their career at 21, 22. And it's, you know, well, wow, like I'm no longer a soccer player, or I've just played my last football game. You know, things they've done for 15, even 20 years in some case, or close to 20 years, and they haven't done that, then hopefully as they went, their education provided them, you know, yeah, sure, it gives them the diploma, but hopefully it provided them education to get into something that they are genuinely interested in, or they run that very real risk of kind of having at least a few years into adulthood, maybe decades, of just kind of going through it, but still kind of thinking of the last time you were really into something is when you were an athlete. And that unfortunately happens a lot. I think it was 2016, the either National League or American League, I don't remember, one of the two rookies of the year, like one of the rookies of the year, Major League Baseball in 2016 or maybe 17. But in the off season, he was a plumber. Like, and it wasn't, you know, it obviously by that point wasn't some need for money. And it's not something that he did when he was, like, say, in minor league. But it was something new. It was just something new he got into. And, you know, at first just to kind of help people out. I think it was just to help some people out and just to basically be like an aid for some guy he knew. And eventually he started getting honestly interested in how plumbing worked, of all things. And I remember a story from that article where the same year that he got the Rookie of the Year, that winter, he came home one day and was telling his wife, like, I installed my first sink by myself today. And in her words, that was a 10 on his excitement scale. Like, he was so pumped that he'd installed a sink. And she said winning Rookie of the Year was like a 7. You know? Like,
hey, you know, the people who run my insurance billing stuff, like as we contract out to this billing company, and when I was interviewing them, I mean, these are people who like had looked at being clinicians, and they just realized their passion instead of that was making the numbers right. Like something about, oh man, there's numbers out there in the world that are wrong on spreadsheets. We want to like make those correct. Was like, I mean, it's just what gets them.
yeah.
And, you know, of course, to me, that sounds crazy because like I hate looking at spreadsheets. But the thing that matter of fact, I'm going to talk to them on Monday. I may even ask this question. I would be interested to know the story. What exploration led to them figuring that out? Because that's one thing that nobody is ever going to like figure out unless they just are trying stuff. Like nobody is going to wake up in the dead middle of the night and be like, oh man, maybe spreadsheets is like what I love. Like nobody, that's not a thing anybody ever said.
Right, exactly.
So exploration led them to that somehow. I just don't know how.
Yeah, and that's a perfect example because, like you said, in terms of like at a cocktail party, what's the least interesting thing you normally bring up? Spreadsheets and numbers in general are probably two of them, but there's a super important part of what you just said. Like nobody in the world like is not at least impressed or intrigued by somebody who's talking about what they genuinely find out they like love to do and are good at. It can be spreadsheets, but when you can feel that very real energy, then it automatically raises the bar on what you think about that person. Because as soon as they get to talk about what they're good at, nothing else matters for that, like while they're talking about it. So bringing it to this example, or like you said, I don't even remember how to say it. Yeah, like the Geminid meters, or another example in the book. Like I love the horseshoe crab example. The girl who studied horseshoe crab. Yeah, because like that was legitimately inside of a top scholarship in the nation interview process with 5 people. She mentions feeling how, she wasn't even sure she belonged in that room because everybody else in the process was your typical valedictorian, every honor society in the book, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And she was, an above average student, no real extra clubs, but she happened to find this interest in marine biology by accident. I said, these things are very cool. Like but because she gave herself time to find it, got into it, and she walks in, and the first question the interviewer asked was, tell me about horseshoe crabs. Again, because you could just tell in her writing that it was unique enough and it was interesting enough. And because they're like, what is this? This isn't what I normally read. Tell me about it. And she's, that instantly she said that she felt, she's like, oh, like I can talk about this. And so she did. And she ends up getting that scholarship over everybody else. Like it's a perfect example of how simply being engrossing because you're into what you're doing, like can bypass so many other things.
You can actually get much more access as a student to top level mentors when you find stuff that you're interested in, just on virtue of your age and on virtue of being a student. If I suddenly decide I'm into computers and how they can change the world, I ain't gonna get Bill Gates on the phone. I'm gonna get stuck by the gatekeeper to his gatekeeper. There is at least a somewhat higher percentage chance that a 13-year-old interested deeply in something related to that could actually get questions answered from a top level expert in that field. Because I know if I am a massive expert and I'm sitting in my swimming pool full of money on a Tuesday afternoon and my assistant's like, hey, some 13-year-old kid's on the phone and like wants to ask you a question. I don't really know what's going on. I'm gonna be like, well, okay, that's different. That hasn't happened for a while. Let's see what this is about. Most people assume they can't off of their age. They actually have so many more doors open.
That's true. Yeah, it's completely backwards to what most people think.
Yeah,
most people think you need to be older, just like you said, like by virtue of being younger, that makes you more. It makes you more that. I'm going to basically bring completely outside book into play here. There's something out there called the purple cow. It's a book idea by Seth Godin, who's brilliant. But the whole idea of the purple cow is if you're driving past fields and, whether you're used to farm life or not, you're going to be like, oh, some cows. After a while, you don't notice any more cows. But if you were to see a purple cow, you would be like, there's a purple cow. And like you said, by virtue of being younger, if you actually find that interest and then just simply put that effort into actually reaching out to people, you're going to stand out to somebody. Yeah, because you're in an automatic minority by doing so.
Yeah, I talked to somebody about how to set up and develop a private practice who was a student, and they reached out to me and said, hey, will you talk to me about private practice? That's a thing I usually charge $180 to $200 an hour for. And I gave it to him free because he's a student and because he's young and, almost nobody ever says as a student, hey, please tell me about this thing. So I was like, oh, okay, sure. Let's just see what happens. So, I mean, the people who are top level are human beings just like everybody else. Like, I mean, they get interested whenever a young person is super interested in their thing. So there is an important thing I do want to say to parents who might consider looking into this. This would be a thing for parents to start reading when your kid is like 8 or 10. And there's a couple of reasons I say that. Number one is that we are so used to results by volume. Just do more, do more, do more, do more. And unfortunately, in a lot of areas, that is rewarded. And so a lot of people would benefit if you're thinking about maybe looking into this and like, oh man, my kid's going to be going to college here in 10 years. it wouldn't be a bad idea to start reading it now and just start to like get used to the idea that, hey, maybe 30 hours of free time a week for a kid is really not such a bad idea. And I say it because I have the recognition that you're not going to like shoot through a book in the afternoon and be able to change all of your thinking about everything all at once. That's just not how that works. If it was, we wouldn't be counselors.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And the second thing I would want to point out is for both parents and any teenagers who might read this book is same thing. You can't shoot through it in an afternoon and expect to get the benefit from it. This is there's like the philosophical part of it, but there's a lot of technical guide in this.
Yeah.
Stuff to try out, stuff to work into your daily, weekly, monthly schedule. And so you are not going to be able to read this once and make it work. Like you're going to have to treat it like a textbook, like go back and be like, wait, how was I supposed to handle this? Oh yeah, right. This is it. Because the thing we didn't talk about at all, we didn't talk about any of the nuts and bolts of like how this works. And frankly, I think he says it well enough that I don't know if I could add anything particularly valuable. So I would say just read it like he would. But you're not going to be able to utilize this if you read it once. You got to treat this like a textbook and a technical manual and go back to it over and over.
Yeah. And take notes while you're reading it. Like if you don't normally do that, this is a great book to just take those little notes. Like you were saying, there are a lot of like action step guides and in-depth ones. So back to what I consider your like the summary of the action steps, like just those key ones, especially for the student athlete. The number one was that declutter free time to create something, and kind of tied with that, number two is also look at it and remove any outliers that you don't need. And I said, like, it's kind of the same thing, but it's also a little bit more specific. And that just means that as a student or a student athlete who's trying to be the best that they can be, and like you said, the idea of doing more is better being the prevailing thought process right now, there's definitely something in your schedule, if not more than one thing, that does not need to be there at all. Assuming other things are lined up for you, fairly well, like you are a good student, you have decent test scores, and again, you have other things that make you interesting, that's not going to need to be there.
If you ain't passionate about it, people can tell. Like, if they ask you about student government and you say the same thing everybody else has already said, I mean, they know. Like, I'll never forget, I had a job, I was interviewing for somebody for a job, and that interview, in my mind, ended 3 minutes in. I already knew this person was out. I stuck around 30 minutes to be polite.
Right.
Yeah, but it comes through. It comes through when you're passionate. It comes through when you're just checking the box. So don't think you're going to fool anybody. Yeah,
exactly. And it's like, again, like the longer list, think about you as a person watching this. Anytime you see a list, this is a random list of names that I came up with. When you see something with that much writing, if that was a list of accomplishments, by the time you're on the third line, you're hazing out. Like, again, like, unless, and that's what happens, again, that's what happens as a person. That's what happens as a boss. That's what happens as a hiring expert. That's what happens as an admission officer. You read through lists. When you see Spanish club, chess club, student council, whatever it is, over and over and over again, unless there's some key word that really stands it out after a while, it's just all a bunch of writing. Now, here's the one biggest one, I think, like the number 3 on my overall key points for student athletes list that I think every student could use more effectively, but especially athletes, is to use the actual school time itself more effectively. So, because we all know that in school, when you're you're not engaged or involved the whole time. Now, there are some things I don't know. Every school is probably different, and I can't pretend to know. Like, is there an option to fill in random electives with study hall? Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. I don't know. But that was a good one. Like, if you're a busy student and you have time commitments later and are trying to find some way to allow yourself free time to relax and find new things, if you can get rid of random classes you don't actually need and replace it with a study hall, and then actually use study hall to do some of that schoolwork so you don't have to add that on to the rest of your day, awesome. Any of these things that let you use that time that you already have to be in school to get, again, not even necessarily ahead, but simply to get more of it done, so that's less you have to do later. Moving kind of into that law of focus a little bit is what, putting the two together is find new interests. So just like you said, and so we mentioned this before, but can't say it enough, is don't just take free time as meaning equals do nothing time, but put at least something into new things. And way number one to do that was read. But very strong 1B to do that is also just get out places.
Probably one of the best recommendations for the exploration is joining communities of different types, clubs or groups or whatever, because that is basically one of the easiest ways to find out extremely quickly if you're good at stuff. Like if you're trying to explore through following a YouTube tutorial, that is just simply less efficient. If you go out and there's a group for the thing you want to try out, you can figure out in 2 or 3 meetings if you're terribly interested. And then, if it's like, wow, okay, this isn't for me, then okay, next group.
I do think student athletes, or again, the student who has to be busier to some degree, you have to do this on purpose. Like I said, that doesn't mean like pick an interest and then see and then just hope you like it. But you do need to because you do have less time in the day because of because of sports practice, weights, maybe private lessons, etc. You do need to take that, like find that time and specifically put some of it into, I'm going to read for an hour a day, or I'm going to, spend, every weekend, go to said community group or check out something new on the weekend, or hell, walk through town. It's like, something. I do think you need to actively do it on purpose, the busier you are, so that you don't fall in that trap of simply, like I said, inadvertently being lazy, even if that's not your goal.
I don't know if this is useful for other people or no, but I know one of the ways this ends up impacting myself is, of course, I work a ton running a business. I actually have to have a pretty massive block of free time before I start feeling that internal pressure to do something with my free time. So I can sit most of a day on Saturday, which is one of my days off, and like not really do anything. But it's finally about 7 p.m. on Saturday. Like I'm like, oh man, I want to do something. So the more you do, almost the more free time you sometimes need just to like take the pressure off and start having the ability to get interested in stuff. So don't lose sight of how important the blocks of free time become.
You have to be stressed in order to do these things. I mean, physical exertion is a stress. Competitive exertion is a stress. Studying a test is a stress. Going through a breakup is a stress. Trying to decide whether or not to ask the first girl ever out, when you're 13 years old is a stress, And so in order to basically, like I said, remain healthy and remain a high performance individual, the stress has to have periods of rest in order to recover your performance and whatever that is. And so just like you said, the busier you are, you probably do need bigger chunks of time. Like, to basically is because, it's almost like it's momentum almost. But it's like you need that gas tank to reach a certain level before your body's finally open to do it again. It's like you said earlier too, it's not going to be the first, third, fifth time that you happen to come across something. Put yourself into it routinely, because you never know when something's going to be that last little bridge or connection between something you're simply doing and true interest. Like, I think the horseshoe crab example actually, again, was perfect for this. Like, the girl in question there, her interest was spiked on the biology portion from a simple class poster she did and got good feedback on. She's like, maybe this is something I'd be good at. It was on the Chesapeake or Hudson Bay, whatever it was. And so she decided to reach out and check on an internship for it. She got that, which again, only because she purposely tried to look into it. Didn't take a lot of effort, just some emails. She does that. She does what is admittedly very boring work, but she wanted to do a good job. So she did that. But then she mentions how it was specifically when a lobster fisherman, or I don't even know what they're called, but a lobster guy came into the lab, was having a conversation with like the lead scientist professor, and she happened to notice how the research that she was helping with data was actually helping in real life, or the changes it was having on real life, on real people. That for her, that was that bridge. When she saw that connection of real life coming into what she did, that's what energized her into the research. And then that's what ended up building up for the next few years into eventually giving a presentation to the community as a whole while still being in high school, and to that eventual question, tell me about horseshoe crabs, that got her that big scholarship.
A good point is to let yourself try stuff, even if it would be surprising if you're interested in it. Because I'll speak for myself. I thought I really didn't much like sports for kind of a long time, until in gym class one day we happened to try racquetball, and I realized, oh, I don't like team sports. Turns out I like sports if it's just me and if I'm hitting something. Which then jumped me into martial arts a couple of years later, and that ended up being a lifelong pursuit. I've pursued that for, I don't know, what is it, 16 years, 18? Yeah, nigh on 2 decades now. But like in my mind, I would have never imagined that I liked sports, but it was one particular aspect of it. I like individual sports and I like hitting stuff. And that led me into a lifelong interest.
The last 2 points that I wanted to bring up, or I said, the last one really, and this one I think especially is for somebody who might be, hopefully made it to this point or something, but is reading the book, but it's still kind of iffy, especially from the high demand level of a student athlete. And so all the extra hours of practice is like, how much is putting in this little extra effort and or taking some things away to create time going to actually be able to help me, rather than that little bit extra. And so like everybody has heard of the theory of diminishing returns, just in general, how eventually you get to a point where the extra work you do only gives you a tiny little bit of improvement.
I'm glad you explained it, because I disagree with your statement. I do not think everybody knows the law of diminishing returns.
Okay, you're probably actually right. Well, go ahead.
So I mean, you said it pretty close, but in short, your effort and your returns will go up only to a certain point, and eventually you will reach a point where if you put in more effort, you do not get any more significant returns. If I lift weights 2 hours a day, I might get roughly similar returns. If I lift weights 10 hours a day, at some point, that those extra hours don't count for anything. I don't get it.
Yeah, and that's probably a really good point. I'm glad you went into that, because you're probably right. It's that thing where those things I assume.
Also, as business owners business owners usually know diminishing returns. A lot of regular folk don't.
That's a good point. But yeah, so as a student athlete who tends to think of like whenever they want to keep getting better at their sport, and or looking at that college and getting that college to notice them that they really want to go to and play, their answer is usually more. But that, like I said here, accomplishments and especially mastery, which we'll get into in just one more second. Accomplishments and mastery amplify themselves. As I said, like they're not simple additions on a list. Like you said, when you can see that somebody's actually achieved a truly unique accomplishment or mastery, that automatically draws your attention much more than simply adding something to the list. But then in that last law, the law of innovation says, so that doesn't mean it has to be something that necessarily took an enormous amount of time or was even necessarily super hard. Like I said, because the way that it's described is if somebody even just doesn't quite understand it, but it's interesting enough to make them wonder about it, they will automatically see it as impressive. There's definitely value in being the best basketball player you can be, or the best soccer player you can be. Like, absolutely, but it's also understand, and they do, that's why they're so stressed usually, it's super competitive. But there are other things you can become very good at, or even, one of the best at, that by virtue of not as many people being involved, don't really take as much time. And like I said, and you can actually become become very accomplished by simply putting in that little bit of effort and that time into it. And again, they will actually again, it's not just an addition on the list. It will amplify it. It will make it much better. So the way I see it is that interesting achievements, no matter how hard they necessarily actually are, but interesting achievements plus athletic prowess is going to give you exponential success in terms of getting where you want to go. I say it's going to be an enormous amplifier.
Yeah, that's one of the ones we were talking about as we talked about that idea is you guys have one going on at the gym right now with Moss Wrestling. That's such a young sport. A person can kind of like show up and really not having trained very much for it and possibly be good at it just because this is not a thing a lot of people are engaging with right now. One of my favorite bodybuilders of all time, Arnold Schwarzenegger, like he was good, but he was also competing against a very small pool of people. You look at bodybuilding now and you're competing against hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of like crazy high level people.
Good point.
If I open my door and I yell down to one of my other counselors, like, hey, name a bodybuilder, who are they going to say?
Arnold, right? Exactly.
So, like, I mean, logically, we recognize that, like, all right, yeah, sure, he was competing against a smaller pool, but that doesn't make the accomplishment stick out less. So it is okay to kind of go, like, to certain types. Don't think it's too far, but certain types of smaller ponds in order to stick out a little more.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. To go into your example, and I won't go too deep into the specifics of the sport, but yeah, like Moss Wrestling, this is a perfect example of that. I said, it's basically seated tug of war with the stick. It sounds insane. By all means, check it out on YouTube if you haven't already come across it through Viking Performance Training. But it's MAS wrestling, but it's actually super intense. But again, it's a small sport everywhere in the world, but it's bigger in other parts than it is in the US. And so, but going into it, we had, for example, the first time I came across it through just coming across it in like a magazine or something, and then eventually connected with the president, which again, the fact that you can do that shows you how small it is. But we had a competition in one of the first couple years the gym was open. One of the guys at the gym who won the competition got it, qualified him for nationals. We got him to nationals, and then he won the national championship. The competition was the first time he'd ever Moss wrestled. National championships was the second time he ever Moss wrestled, and he won. And then he ended up getting it, he went to one other big show, won it as well. And then he ended up on the World USA team competing in, I think it was Kyrgyzstan, wherever that, former Soviet Union Kyrgyzstan. And again, to have only competed basically 3 times in a sport, and then say, you competed at the World Championships in Kyrgyzstan as part of the World Nomad Games. Nobody that looked at that wouldn't be like, man, like, so, like, again, like, you're on the world team for Moss Wrestling? You don't have any clue what that is. But they're going to at least, like, it's going to at least stand out as being something, like, impressive.
If I had to give a final takeaway for anybody who wants to like, look at this, it would be that, as a counselor, I get the inside look on a lot of people's lives. And in a way, I get to cheat. I kind of get to listen to stories and see what works for people, what doesn't work for people. Everything I read in this, nothing stood out to me as like, oh, wow, this would never work. Like, kind of comparing it to all the stories in my head from people I've worked with, I'm like, yeah, I know people who have executed this plan and it seems to work. I don't know anybody who's executed this plan and it hasn't worked out at least reasonably well. Like, you know, okay, if they missed their absolute number one school, they probably still got in their number three, or still came pretty close to their goal. So like, just getting to speak as somebody who's seen a lot of people try a lot of stuff and gotten to see whether it works or whether it doesn't. Everything in here stands out as stuff that seems like it's pretty practical. It has a pretty high probability of working out if you work it.
So again, to everybody here, you know, glad you joined us. Again, the book was How to Be a High School Superstar by Cal Newport. He has other really good books. So I've gotten into, in fact, a couple others involving students, says right here, or he also has How to Become a Straight A Student and How to Win at College. I think they're, well, you know, How to Win at College, obviously, but I believe the Straight A Student one is also geared around college performance. But said, like, definitely an author on my recent watch list, getting his material down. I said, hope this helps you guys apply everything. And again, thanks again for joining us on the first ever Apex Viking book review.